Good evening, guys. I was gonna talk about all this stuff in the class meeting with you all, but I ended up missing it. Uh, my bad. So that's why this video's here. That's why it's late. Wasn't planning on needing to do this, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about the readings, and I'm gonna talk a bit about the topic in question, and we'll kind of uh, go through the screen here. So yeah. Okay, that's fun. Wrong screen. All right, there we go. So, uh, I'm not gonna talk much about the Rachel's reading, especially about the case studies, without getting into too much detail. One of them hit in particular, it really hits home hard for me, and I'm just not comfortable talking about it right now. I have thought about those issues at length, but it's not something that I'm comfortable sharing in a classroom setting at this time. But I felt that their minimal conception of morality was interesting. Um, the idea that trying to guide one's conduct by reason and by rules, which is similar to how I've structured my own sense of morals, so I understand where that comes from. Uh, but I think that also, at a minimum, there is a uh, significant influence in that reasoning process that's inflicted by the cultural context, the spiritual context, especially for some of these case studies, that a person is in and has grown up with and is conditioned with, for lack of a better term. Uh, so I thought it was a useful starting point, but I also feel like it is very much the tip of a very, very large iceberg, uh, and one that could be really interesting to get into. But I think we'll pivot into the GIS space now, which is fine by me. Um, so I'm going to talk more about the idea of profession. As I try to grab the next article here real quick. Should have had this ready. All right, high end structure. Um, so, uh, I read this. I thought it was interesting. The idea that you have a moral code that is sort of the underpinning of your profession. And I thought that worked in some cases, but not in others. I feel like it works for lawyers. I feel like it works for journalists. Lawyers, being united around the idea of doing justice and making sure you're of equal treatment under the law, and the ideas of innocence until proven guilty and things like that. Uh, Journalists tend to have a very strong conviction that the truth and the facts matter, and that is the most important thing. So they are kind of united around not just a value, but an idea and a principle. GIS is so diverse, I find it hard to find a principle, at least an easily expressed principle, that we can all coalesce around. But I do think there is a value that's important to us, and I want to talk about that, and I think that value is accuracy. Accuracy is probably our most important ethical value. When we get to talk, I get to talking with people at conferences or over lunch or whatever that work in the field, like us. The things that come up often are projections, data, and organizational culture and reporting structures, because everybody does it a little bit differently, and everybody has stuff that they like and they don't like about their own structures, and everybody likes to talks about it from time to time. At least in the government space. So, but I think accuracy, coming back to that, one thing that we all care about is making sure our data is as accurate as possible. And this opens a huge can of worms, because accuracy is perfect accuracy is impossible. at least for the time being. With the rise of 3D GIS, maybe true accuracy or accuracy down to a level that's meaningless is possible. You could argue that we're there already, at least on a small scale. You have GPS units that can go down to tenths, hundredths of an inch. But you still have questions about datums and geoids and spheroids and projections. We have aerials that were captured. At Newark, we have aerials going back as far as 2005. We don't have every year, but they go back that far. And the source projections range from NAD 83 to NAD 83 hard to NAD 83 20. Well, maybe ones in 2011. And we had a couple that were in UTM. And these are all State Plane, Ohio South, usually. But it's a little all over the place. And there are ways to standardize that a lot more nowadays. But projection matters and data matters. And what this might be standard for me might not be standard for my counterpart over at the county, at our county government, or the same standard that, the town 10 miles over uses either. To say nothing of a region or a state, because like in Ohio, we have our State Plane North and South zones, but each of those has 4 or 5 different revisions at this point. So is everybody on State Plane NAD 83 2011? Are they on NAD 83 Harn? Are they on NAD 83 from 83? Accuracy really matters. Temporal accuracy really matters. And then you get into questions of, well, okay, was our data captured with GPS? Was it digitized? Was it georeferenced? How good was the georeference? What was the mean square error? What is an acceptable mean square error? And, what point do you have to certify that this is accurate to this detail? And that's just positional accuracy. How often do you need to resurvey everything to ensure that it's still accurate? Can you just rely off georeferencing and reckoning or digitizing off of an aerial photo? Or do you have to go out there with GPS and shoot that valve down to 4 inches, 1 inch, half an inch? Serious questions here. Because accuracy is something that we can get around, but there's a problem there in that accuracy is A, expensive, very expensive, the more you get into it, and the more that goes to scale. And also, another really important thing is what's feasible. Because right now I am a department of 1 at Newark. We're a city of about 50,000 on the nose. Decidedly middle income, lower middle income. But there's a city on the other side of Columbus that 60,000 people, average tax bracket probably 2 or 3 higher. They could maybe afford more accuracy than we can afford. So what's feasible for them is not going to be feasible for me, and that's before you even get into the rural counties and the rural cities that maybe have a quarter of our funding levels. I don't know. These are just some of the problems I see. I think that there's a moral ideal that could be there. That is, we want things to be as accurate and as free of errors as possible. But then there's questions about how do we go about that? How do we go about that in a way that everybody can trust? And how do we enforce that? This is one of the questions that the GISP I hear get thrown around a lot locally. Okay, they do something bad. What happens? Okay, they lose their GISP. What does that do for them? What does that hurt them for? Not a lot. At least not in Ohio. We have a pretty active professional community. So I don't know. These are some musings, some thoughts. I'm curious to hear what you guys have got to say. I am looking forward to some responses, discussion in the comments. Looking forward to seeing your presentations. Here, hopefully, I guess that'll probably be tomorrow, realistically. But thank you guys. Have a good weekend. Have a safe Labor Day. And I'll see you around.